Good morning. Live from our studio here at Kukumlimle in Accra, this is Joy News Desk with me, Denisia Pomaije. On our desk this hour, the National Petroleum Authority assures Ghana has over 5 weeks of fuel stock despite Middle East tensions.
As you asked, what is Ghana's current stock level of petroleum products? As of last Friday, we have diesel stocks to last us over 5 weeks. And then for petrol, we have almost 7 weeks, 6.8 weeks to last.
The Chamber of Petroleum Consumers is, however, warning the conflict will significantly impact the next shipments, leading to higher prices at the pumps.
That would feed China and would feed India, would feed other parts of Asia. Once these cargoes, about a fourth or 20% of global cargo supplies, do not move, what you are actually getting is a situation where the world would then be scrambling for the remaining 80 or 75%.
Well, our research team will be here to help break down the figures. Also, 10 illegal miners confirmed dead, 30 battling for their lives, and several others still feared trapped after a mine pit caved at Atta Ne Atta in the Asutifi South district of the Ayawaso region. Global Info Analytics poll tips NDC's Baba Jamal to win Ayawaso East by-election with 75%. And President Mahama scheduled to open the 2026 judicial year of the African Court on Human and People's Rights later today as guest speaker. Details as he is also expected to hold bilateral talks with the President of Tanzania. Joy News, we are independent, fearless, credible. Please stay with us. Welcome. It's an absolute delight to have you back. 10 illegal miners have died following a mine cave-in in Att Ne Atta in the Asutifi South district of the Ayawaso region. At least 30 others are in critical condition after the pit reportedly collapsed while they were working underground. An undisclosed number of miners are still feared trapped beneath the rubble as rescue efforts continue. The injured are currently on admission at the St. Elizabeth Catholic Hospital in Shidie. You would recall that the community has previously been in the spotlight following a confrontation involving the National Anti-Illegal Mining Operations Secretariat NIMOS in 2025. Well, environmental journalist Erastus Asaridonko joins us via Zoom with some details. Erastus, is the rescue effort still underway?
So let me tell you what we know at the moment. No, the rescue efforts have ended. Yesterday, they had the inclination that quite a number of people were trapped in the pit. And so they brought in heavy equipment, precisely excavators, to dig and search for survivors. But after hours, they could not find any more survivors, so they have discontinued any form of rescue efforts. Currently, as we speak, the official figure, as I'm getting, as at the number of bodies that have been deposited at the mortuary, is 9. 9 bodies have been deposited at the mortuary as we speak. 4 people were sent to the St. Elizabeth Hospital at Shidie. From the 4, we do understand that 1 is sustained minor injuries, 3 are in serious condition and are currently responding to treatment. But as we speak, the whole place have been abandoned for now, and rescue efforts have ended.
Okay, so given the previous confrontations involving NIMOS in 2025, what does this particular incident reveal about the effectiveness of anti-illegal mining operations in the area?
It tells you there is poor supervision both at the District Security Council level and from NIMO's supervisory role, or let me say rapid response to that particular area. If you remember, what NIMO sought to do back then was to stop a cyanide leaching joint There are many cyanide leaching joints within the Asutifi South, Asutifi North areas, and precisely the towns affected include Ntotroso, Kenyase number 1 and 2, Att Ne Atta, and others. And many of them are sitting on tributaries which join the Tano River. And that is what NIMOS sought to stop at Brunikrum, where the people attacked them at the Petroleum police station, and that was it. Since then, we have not heard anything from that. And I think that is what is breeding the impunity we are seeing now, where people have sought to take over somebody's farm and have turned it into a mining pit, which has eventually collapsed and killed 9 people.
Okay, so Erastus, if I understand you clearly, this cyanide leaking joints, these are mining residues that people also try and extract gold from. Is that correct?
That is correct, indeed. They believe that there is 70% recoverable gold in the tailings, which is the mining residue, which the Shamfan operators, illegal miners, artisanal miners are throwing away. Now they are buying that in large quantities, and they are buying cyanide in drums. And with the assistance of Burkinabe citizens, they are now doing what they call leaching of the mining residue to gain the gold, to dissolve the mining residue, and then eventually get the gold from that. Now the residue goes into many sources, open environments, water sources, and all that. And that is a very dangerous contamination point for the entire community where these cyanide leaching joints or Sankofa is happening.
So the situation is rife in Asutifi South and Asutifi North. And this is also
precisely.
Okay, so it's the same area, this is Asutifi South or North, where NIMOS was also attacked. So does that mean that NIMOS isn't doing enough over there to stop these illegal miners, deter them from going there? Because clearly they don't seem to want to stop. It's a good business for them, is it not?
Well, if you know the operations of NIMOS, clearly you see that NIMOS serves as a rapid response team rather than a local response unit, where the police at the local level, the district security council is supposed to serve that role. They are supposed to police and enforce environmental laws. NIMOS always comes in at the tail end on the which where it is a sort of an emergency. And so what NIMOS sought to do back then was to go in there, stop that activity which they saw on their way to embark on an operation. But the community had a different response to it. There were influential people who, until date, have been able to sort of calm NIMOS from the situation, and these cyanide leaching joints continue to work in that area. The Att Ne Atta situation, the mining which has taken place, is somebody's farm, which they started, I learned, about a week ago. When they saw that there was gold on that farm, they approached the landowner. Initially, he decided not to sell. I understand from sources in there that they threatened him, and so he had to give in and give the land over to them and accept the pittance for them to mine. If you look at the pictures that are showing currently on your screen, you could see that this is not an organized form of mining. It's an illegal mining activity that went on, a free-for-all kind of digging. Everybody is digging and trying to get their hands on something. And so they were not properly shielding the loose earth from coming over to them. And that is how the loose earth finally came over them and suffocated many of them.
Okay, so after the death of these 9 illegal miners, how's the community reacting to this? The Att Ne Atta community specifically?
It will surprise you to know what I'm learning from the ground. In fact, after speaking with some of the miners themselves who don't want to come on camera, they are saying that, well, it's likely that they will go back because they found quite a sizable amount of gold in that earth. In his own words, he says, the loose earth, meaning to it, all the earth that you see over there contains gold. And so they are likely to go back in some few days to continue digging in that very enclave, unless authorities cordon off the place to prevent any further tragedy.
Okay, speaking of authorities securing the place, are there efforts to close the pits? Because you're telling us now that it's actually a farm, someone's farm. He or she was coerced to give out the farmlands to these illegal miners. And so are there any efforts to cover the pits?
None that I know of. Currently, the people have left the area, but I'm learning that that is temporarily. The place has not been cordoned off. The police were there yesterday. There were no attempts to cordon the place off. It's likely that the artisanal miners are going to come back in the coming days.
Very interesting. Thank you so much, Erastus Asare Donko. That's environmental journalist. Now, we also have Pakwesi Shandov. He's Media Relations Officer, Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, and he also joins us via Zoom. Shandov, has surveillance weakened in the Asutifi South area, and why?
Absolutely not. Surveillance in that part of the country has not in any way weakened at all. You would recall that not too long ago, NIMOS was deployed to that particular enclave on an operation. Of course, there was a confrontation, and so the approach back then was to withdraw and regroup. As I speak to you, there is a comprehensive plan to invade that particular jurisdiction again. This time around, the plan and purpose of NIMOS for that particular area is a permanent full-scale deployment, which actually ties into our already designed program of full-scale NIMOS deployment. Because what we have observed over the period is that anytime NIMOS goes into an area to execute an operation, after they have left, the illegal miners obstinately would return. And under normal circumstances, one may expect that, well, the local enforcement units are supposed to be the vanguards, but it appears that is not happening, not to cast any blame, but we are not seeing that kind of local protection, or if like local enforcement. And so what NIMOS is going to do, effective the end of the first quarter, is a full-scale 24/7 uninterrupted deployment to that particular enclave and indeed to all other flashpoints. We believe that when that is done, incidents of this nature will become a thing of the past.
Okay, so you're saying that they are going to deploy permanent. We're gathering from Erastus that NIMOS is usually a rapid response measure. So if they are going to pitch camp over there, you think this will be enough to deter the illegal miners? Because Erastus is telling us that the community says, look, I mean, we are going back. There's a lot of money in that venture. Would that be deterrent enough? 24-hour deployment?
Absolutely. For the locals, they have always believed, and indeed it's one of the major hurdles when it comes to the fight against illegal mining. Those who are the participants do not even see that their endeavor is environmentally wrong. They see it as a viable economic venture. And so if you are if continuously are dealing with people who think this enterprise is not a problem, you would have to, by all means, scale up. And in scaling up, what we are doing is the 24/7 uninterrupted surveillance. Once the NIMOS personnel are stationed permanently there, I do not think, unless, of course, they want an open warfare, which, of course, NIMOS is able to accommodate anyway. But I do not think that the miners, sorry to say, perhaps in their right senses, would see a full-scale deployment and still be moving into the pits. That would not happen. And that is why we believe it's an effective treatment to the crisis in that enclave and indeed all other flashpoints across the country where Galamsey is very prominent and prevalent.
Okay, but it happened in 2025. If it happens again, how prepared is NIMOS against community members, residents, a number of them?
As I speak, over 500 NIMOS task force have been adequately trained and equipped for the full-scale nationwide deployment. Indeed, the numbers have been increased because it has become apparent that some of the illegal miners in certain parts of the country have become very aggressive and combative. And so for the fact that the situation that we have on our hand is increasingly becoming threatening, you just have to increase your numbers and then enhance your logistics. So that is what we have done. About 500 have been trained. I cannot disclose how many of those would be deployed to that area, but rest assured, the number that will come into that particular jurisdiction will be more than enough to contain any form of confrontation or excesses so that we won't have what we had earlier. But I also have to place on record that in that particular incident in Chidim, somewhere in November, I think it was on the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd of November, one of them, 2025, the Sector Minister, Honorable Makofi Boa, had an engagement with the Speaker of Parliament for an investigation to be instituted into that particular attack. The findings have been concluded. I'm sure that very soon we'll put them out accordingly, because we had promised that that incident, where even, of course, some influential persons in that enclave were mentioned, is one that is serious. So we have wrapped up the investigations, and I'm sure the findings will be out very soon.
Okay, so on our documentary where the Amansi Central DC was cited in, the documentary Attacks for Galamsey, where Galamseyers were made to pay some amount of money. You said there was going to be an investigation into that. How far?
Yes, how far? We've come very far with the investigation and the probing and the inquiry into that particular expose. Of course, let me see the opportunity.
Okay, and what are the findings?
Yes, so I'm saying we have come very far. The matter is yet to be thoroughly concluded, but it is far advanced now. I think we've been able to dot all the I's and cross all the T's, because we took the response of the assembly as well. The argument they advanced predominantly was the fact that these charges and these levies have long existed and that it wasn't a new development. But in the expose that was shown to the whole country, I mean, the investigators posed as illegal miners, not legal miners. They posed as illegal miners. And so the elephant in the room and the question to be addressed is that even if it is an age-old levy that you have been charging, these people who came to you posed as illegal miners, why then did you interact with them? Closure will be put on that by the close of the week, and I'm sure when we are done, we'll put out the fine details on the relevant sanctions, if any, and the reforms that have to be instituted to kill the matter, of course, across all the other assemblies and districts, because apparently these charges are, actually spread to other jurisdictions as well. So by close of week, we should have closure on this matter. Okay,
all right. So we'll be expecting that and engaging you, especially on what happens to the Amansi Central DC cited in that documentary. Thank you so much, Pakwesi Shandoff. He's Media Relations Officer for the Lands Ministry. Now, moving on, the National Petroleum Authority, NPA, has moved to calm fears among Ghanaians, assuring the public that the country has fuel stock to last several weeks despite the escalating Middle East crisis following recent Iran attacks and regional tensions. While speaking on Joy News' The Probe on Sunday, the Director of Economic Regulation and Planning at NPA, Abbas Ibrahim Tasunti, acknowledged that Ghana, as a net importer of petroleum products, will inevitably feel the ripple effects of the global oil market disruptions. However, he emphasized that the authority has robust measures in place to ensure consistent supply and also shield consumers from immediate shortages.
Ghana will definitely be affected, just like any other country in the world. So the focus will be what plans we have in place to ensure that consumers do not lack fuel for the economy to run. So as you asked, what is Ghana's current stock level of petroleum products? As of last Friday, we have diesel stocks to last us over 5 weeks. Estimated roughly, it will last us up to 5.3 weeks. And then for petrol, we have almost 7 weeks, 6.8 weeks to last. And this is something that we monitor all the time. If you know that for a country like Ghana, which is a net importer, even without this war, we always ensure that we have a plan to make petroleum products available for consumers in the country. And so this is not something that is being done because of the war, but it's something we do on the regular. It's one of NPA's major mandates to ensure that petroleum products are always available. So as of Friday, like you said, the last monitoring that we did, petrol again will last us up to almost 7 weeks, 6.8 weeks, and diesel will last us about 5.3 weeks. But just to add that this does not mean that we don't have imports coming in. We discharge petroleum products almost every day in this country. So we have a plan where almost every day discharge of petroleum products have been done. That is for the imported products. And we also have the Central Oil Refinery, which is consistently producing. It has been doing so since June last year, June 2025. And as we speak, they are producing on a daily basis and putting petroleum products on the market. The Atuabo gas processing plant is also producing and putting LPG on the market. So in terms of stocks, whilst we consume what is in tank, we have a plan of import, for import as well. we have about 4 vessels at the anchorage as we speak in Tema, which are waiting to discharge 2 cargoes for diesel and 2 cargoes for petrol, and other imports are also scheduled to come in. So for now, to answer your question directly, we have products to last the country for almost 6 and 7 weeks for petrol and diesel and petrol respectively. So the stocks I mentioned includes both local production and imports. So these are stocks in tank. But like I mentioned, for local production, it happens on a daily basis. So every day they are producing, it comes to add to the stocks we have.
Now, what volumes do we get from the Middle East, to be specific? So we understand if this war, in the unlikely event that it extends to a month or beyond, so we know how much of oil we're going to be losing from that region, especially now that that channel has been closed.
So to be specific, Ghana, as a West African country, we do not import petroleum products always directly from the Middle East. And let me be specific, Iran in particular is not a source of petroleum products directly to Ghana. However, it's a global market. We are in a global village, and therefore, whatever happens there will definitely affect us, like I said. So our focus here is, like you mentioned, the Strait of Hormuz is a key shipping line. And the impact that we are going to have is that immediately we are definitely going to see prices go up. The world is very well supplied with petroleum products. So immediately, the concern is not that there will be shortage of petroleum products in the world. The concern is about how freight is going to be impacted.
The Executive Secretary of the Chamber of Petroleum Consumers, COPEC, Duncan Amoah, has also warned that the ongoing hostilities in the Middle East will significantly impact the next shipments, leading to higher prices at the pumps. This comes in the wake of assurances from the National Petroleum Authority that the tensions may not affect the current fuel supply. Mr. Amoah explained that while Ghana currently has enough stock, private traders are already factoring the crisis into their pricing decisions for future cargoes.
I do monitor a lot of these international platforms, and most analysts are cautioning that you'll be doing above 90 by close of tomorrow. 100, we haven't discussed that yet, but most likely by close of trading tomorrow, the figures may not look as good, especially now that some 3 tankers have equally been blown off the Hormuz between the weekend and now. It is not likely any cargo at all whatsoever has been able to move. And like Abba said, these are cargoes that would feed China and would feed India, would feed other parts of Asia. Once these cargoes, about 1/4 or 20% of global cargo supplies, do not move, what you are actually getting is a situation where the world would then be scrambling for the remaining 80 or 75% still floating. And that would mean that money would rather be chasing cargo, and people will be paying higher premiums for cargo that they probably a week ago would have paid something less for. So, like I indicated, the start of a trading week tomorrow would give us a fair idea whether we are doing the 70, 80, 90, as some analysts have already pointed to, around 90, 91. That's the expectation tomorrow, or by close of trading tomorrow. But if it doesn't, and it stays within the 75 region, that in itself would have amounted to almost 8 to 10% within a few days.
Caleb Zulim is with our research desk here at Joy News and joins me with why we should care. Caleb, let's begin with the current price of crude on the world market.
Okay, so the current price of crude is about $79 per barrel. We ended Friday at $72 per barrel. And then because we're in Africa, the trading day starts around 10 a.m. So it's now past 10, I think 20 minutes past 10. That's when trading actually begins. But then in some parts of the Middle East, they've been trading for the day, and then that's where the oil price went up to $79 per barrel. When the U.S. is fully active, that's after 10 a.m., that's when we see active trading, and then that's where we'll determine where the price of petrol or crude oil will remain for the day. Now, understanding why this is a hot topic now, we have to understand the climate of the Middle East. And now, the war is just between Israel and Iran, but because the U.S. is involved and the U.S. has bases in other Middle Eastern countries, Iran has decided to attack these other countries. So Kuwait has been attacked, Bahrain,
UAE,
Qatar, UAE, and now Saudi Arabia. Before I came on there, we got indication that one of the largest crude oil processing plants in Saudi Arabia
has also been attacked.
So it's about 30% of the global supply of crude oil on the market. So if the Middle East is being unpredictable or unstable, you'd know that the price of petroleum products on the market would rise. Again, Iran controls this very important part, the Strait of Hormuz. Now again, because all these countries here are oil-producing countries, when they are taking their oil mainly to the Asian countries, that's China, India, and then some of the other, Pakistan and the rest, they have to pass through this channel. And now effectively, this channel has now been blocked. So if you block this channel, about 20% of the total oil production is not going to pass through again, unless they reroute it through this other side. It's going to take so much money. So once they do the rerouting, we're going to expect to pay more in petroleum products. Okay. So again, this is why this is very important for Ghana, because once supply has been affected, the price of crude oil on the international markets is going to rise. And once that rises, we feel the impacts in Ghana here. Now, we're talking about the price of crude on the markets. I want to take you back to 2022, and that's when Russia invaded Ukraine. We saw the high of $78 per barrel when Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022. We just opened trading day, and we're now doing $78 per barrel. In fact, it was almost 79 for some time. So we're almost at the level where
it was
exactly when Russia invaded Ukraine. And you can see before that, we're on a downward trajectory from highs of around maybe 65 or so. We're coming down, which is
60,
why, exactly, 59, which is why last year, petroleum products in Ghana were doing very good. In fact, we got to 9 cedis per liter for some time. This was one of the main reasons why that happened. So now again that we've seen that the price of crude is going up, currently at $78 per barrel, it means that Ghana will be impacted. Now again, the two main factors that determine the price of oil in Ghana are one, the price of crude on the market, and then the value of our currency. So if your city is doing very well, the impact should be a bit minimal. And this is where good news comes in, because the price of gold has been going up. So Friday, gold was $5,100 per ounce. We're now doing $5,400 per ounce. Now, this again because of the Middle East uncertainty and more traders out, deciding to move their assets to gold. So once that happens, the price of gold goes up and directly impacts the value of our currency. So even though the price of petroleum products has gone up to the levels where it was during the Russia-Ukraine war, gold is holding on a bit for us, and we might be lucky in a few months or so. That's until, that's depending on how long the conflicts in the Middle East.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that, because COPEC is saying that we have enough stocks, but if this prolongs, we'll definitely run out. What do we do then?
Yes, and also the stock that we have is not for the governments of Ghana. It's not for the private players, the BDCs. They have the stock.
And they determine pricing.
They determine the price. So some of the players can decide to release less onto the market, or they release what they have onto the market and then price it very high, because they assume that in the next few months, petroleum on the market, again we showed, is going up. So if they're going back to refill their stocks, they'll be paying more in the next month or two. So they have to make the money now. So some people, even though we have the stock, some of the players might decide to increase their price a bit. But then luckily for us, today, Gold just announced their prices, and they've not gone up too much. Currently, Gold is doing 11 cedis for petrol, and then 12 cedis, 88 pesos for diesel. So even though there's some uncertainty, the market players in Ghana have not priced that into the price of petroleum products on the market yet. But then that depends on how escalating the matter is in the Middle East. If it goes up too much, you're definitely going to see some private players on the Ghanaian space increasing the price of their petroleum products very high, because the assumption is that when they go back to restock, the price of the product they buy from the international markets is going to be very high, and they need to make their money now before they can get that.
And the ripple effect is that if fuel prices go up, transport fares will also go high.
Exactly. Once fuel prices goes up, transport fare goes up, food inflation will go up, because you have to travel to the rural areas to get the produce and bring them down to the urban centers. Once food inflation goes up, overall inflation goes up again. And then it's a cycle. And that's what happened in 2022 when Russia invaded Ukraine. But then the difference this time around is that we have a stronger currency. Back then, we didn't have a strong currency, which is why we felt the impacts very soon. But then luckily for us, gold is doing very well. So once gold continues to do very well, the impacts might be a little bit minimal. Okay. But then again, it depends on how long this conflict goes on in the Middle East.
So the only way this would end or would not happen at all is if the Middle East tensions are de-escalated?
That's one side of it. But then, remember last year, Israel attacked Iran. Yeah. Same time last year, I think 2025 May or so. When that happened, even though the early part of the market was very jittery, in fact, if you look at the trend here, it's around the side that they attacked. So it went up from lows of about $60 to about almost $70 per barrel. But then a few days after the conflict, it went back down, even though they were still fighting in the Middle East. So some traders have already gotten used to the tensions in the Middle East, and even though there's some uncertainty there, they know that, oh, this will end very soon. So they don't place too much premium on the price of crude oil on the market. So even though there's some uncertainty, some people say, oh, this always happens, so we're going to keep our prices where they are. And the other side to it, that there's oversupply of crude oil on the market. And then OPEC says they're going to increase production in April 2026. So once that happens, there's going to be so much supply of crude oil on the market, the prices should not go out of hand.
Okay, thank you so much, Caleb. And that's Caleb with our research desk. Also, a latest survey by Global Info Analytics has forecast a decisive win for the National Democratic Congress candidate Baba Jamal in the Ayawaso East by-election scheduled for Tuesday, March 3. The poll conducted between February 28 and March 1 sampled 972 voters within the constituency and shows Baba Jamal holding a substantial lead over his closest rival, Baba Ali, of the New Patriotic Party, NPP. According to the projections, the NDC candidate commands 75% of the expected vote, while Baba Ali trails with 21%. Independent contender Umaru Sanda Mohammed, who recently parted ways with the NDC, is expected to secure about 3%. The remaining aspirants, Ibrahim Idrisu and David, are each tipped to obtain less than 1% of the ballots cast. Reflecting a race largely dominated by two main political parties. The by-election follows the passing of the sitting Member of Parliament, Mahama Ture, who died in January while receiving treatment at the Kolebu Teaching Hospital, creating a vacancy in the Ayawaso East constituency. Musa Dankwa is Executive Director of Global Info Analytics, and he joins me via Zoom. Oh, unfortunately, we've lost Mr. Musa Dankwa. We are trying to rework our lines to get him, but we know that he's conducted a poll, Global Info Analytics, and it says that Baba Jamal is tipped to win with about 75% the Ayawaso East by-election. And okay, so a little about Global Info Analytics poll. Ayawaso East party affiliation. So we have the NDC, of course, with Baba Jamal tipped to win with about 75%. The NPP 15%, and also about 9% for the other aspirants. And we have 1% undisclosed. Okay, let's move now to the president's job approval. 81% say 81% approve of him, 18% disapprove, and 1% say they have absolutely no opinion. So we have Mr. Musa Dankwa back. Hello, sir. So your poll has tipped Baba Jamal to win with 75%. That's such a commanding lead. What specific demographic or voting patterns are driving such a very decisive margin in Ayawaso East?
Right. Thank you very much for having me. Ayawaso East is a strong NDC. And indeed, 75% of the voters are NDC. 15% are NPP and 9% are floating. So it's a strong NDC, and they are voting purely on party.
Hello, Mr. Musa Dankwa, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yes. I said Ayawaso East is a strong NDC constituency. And if you look at the numbers we have, about 75% voters are NDC, 16% or 50% are NDC, and 9% are voting voters. So the results show that they are voting purely on party.
Okay. So with a sample size of 972 voters, what is the margin of error? And how confident should the public be that this poll accurately reflects Tuesday's outcome?
The poll has a 95% confidence.
95%?
Yes. And margin of error less than 3%.
Okay, so critics often argue that, polls can influence voter turnout or create a bandwagon effect. How do you respond to concerns that releasing this?
Ghana is not the only country that opinion polls are there. So it's not something new we are doing. Everywhere in the world, there's opinion poll.
Okay, and you're saying that you have 95% confidence that your projection would actually materialize on Tuesday?
Yes.
Okay, so given the history of electoral upsets in Ghana, what key variables, of course, such as turnout, party mobilization, or last-minute swings could still overturn this projection that you have 95% confidence in?
Look, this is not a swing consequence. This is the stronghold of NDC. Nothing is going to change about that.
Your data shows independent candidate Umaru Sanda Mohammed polling at just 3%. Does this suggest declining support for independent candidates in urban constituencies, or is this race uniquely polarized?
No, you see, you can't generalize what you see in Lima. If this is happening in a swing constituency, then you can make some inference. This is the stronghold of the NDC, and you don't expect an independent candidate from NDC to do well, but they are voting on party. 96% of NDC voters are voting for party. 96%. Okay,
thank you so much, Mr. Musa Dankwa. He's Executive Director of Global Info Analytics, with that survey that's tipping Baba Jamal to win the Ayawaso East by-election with 75%. Well, we take a break here on Joy News Desk. We'll be back with some more stories. Please stay with us. Welcome back. This is still Joy News Desk. President Mahama is in Arusha, Tanzania, where he'll be the special guest of honor at a ceremony to open the 2026 judicial year of the African Court on Human and People's Rights today. The ceremony will also be used to launch the 20th anniversary of the court. According to the presidency, this is the first invitation for a sitting president of the Republic of Ghana to address the AU Court. Let's cross over now to the AU Court in Tanzania.
Trombone played with such dexterity, and so I wish to compliment you. I'm going to deliver the keynote address, but it's going to be a short speech, not long, because I was vice president from 2009 until 2012, and my president was the late President of the Republic of Ghana, John Evans Atta Mills. And he was a man of brevity. And he liked to tell a joke which had a tremendous influence on me, and so I don't speak for too long. It was about this conference where people were supposed to speak. And there was one speaker who spoke for so long, more than an hour and a half. And as he spoke, people started leaving the hall and leaving the hall. And so by the time he said in conclusion and was wrapping up his speech, there was only one person left in the hall. So he walked up to him and said, "I thank you very much for showing me such respect and waiting to listen to my entire speech." And he says, "I didn't stay because of respect for you. I stayed because I'm the next speaker after you." And so I'll inflict this very short keynote address on you. I'm truly honored to join you this afternoon for the official opening of the 2026 judicial year of the African Court on Human and People's Rights. I'm also to acknowledge that this experience is somewhat daunting. Standing before a panel of judges is admittedly quite intimidating. For many people, this might be their worst nightmare. And perhaps I'm drawing from my own experience, because as a teenager growing up, I often dreamt of my father standing before judges awaiting the decision on his fate. He was detained once and faced the risk twice more, and these fears led to recurring nightmares about him. Honorable judges, I extend my deepest gratitude to you for inviting me to address the court today as your guest of honor at the opening of the judicial year and the launch of the court's 20th anniversary. I'm grateful because this institution and its commemoration hold deep personal significance for me. My connection to these themes is rooted in my family's history, which has shaped my own perspectives on justice and human rights. I've spent much of my life reflecting on justice, due process, and the rule of law. Why are these rights afforded to some and not to others? The same applies to human rights and dignity, which have been on my mind in recent days since I received your invitation. February 24th, last week, marked another anniversary. It was the 60th year since the 1966 coup d'etat in Ghana that overthrew the government of Ghana's first president, Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. My father was a minister of state in Nkrumah's government. Immediately after the coup, he, along with other ministers of state, members of parliament, and other government officials, were asked to report to the police station for their own safety. At the police station, he was interrogated, taken into custody, and he remained in detention for over a year. By 1974, just 8 years later, Ghana, through another coup, was being led by our fifth head of state and third military ruler, Colonel Att Ne Atta. At that time, my father had become a private citizen and was working as a rice farmer and agribusinessman with no involvement in politics or government. He was a staunch believer in democracy and he opposed coup making. But he appreciated Colonel Achampong, whose policies promoted Ghana's self-reliance. He believed that Achampong had Ghana's best interest at heart. Like many parents, my father and I as well often offer unsolicited advice. It starts with our own children, and eventually we extend this unsolicited advice to friends, to neighbors, to strangers, and in my father's case, even to the head of state. My father decided to write a letter to the head of state, Colonel Achampong, to let him know that he was doing a wonderful job of leading Ghana. In that letter, he offered, as usual, his unsolicited advice. And he said, and I quote, "But do not hold on to power for too long. Leave when the applause is the loudest," my father wrote. He sent the letter, and soon after, military personnel arrived at our home and took my father into custody for questioning. He was detained for several days on suspicion of subversion. But later, Colonel Achampong ultimately determined that he posed no real threat and ordered his release. Although I stand before you as a head of state, I remain the child whose father was detained for serving his country and advising its leader. I'm still the little boy who learned how dangerous it can be to challenge those in power, who may act with impunity and assume the role of judges, jury, and executioner over you. And therein lies my belief and respect for the rights and dignity of people. Your Excellencies, honorable judges, ladies and gentlemen, I share my father's story to illustrate that while he was one individual, his experience demonstrates that no one stands alone. The effects of social injustice and human rights violations extend beyond individuals. They impact entire families and communities. Although our continent comprises 55 sovereign nations, our destinies are closely linked together. Globally, many still view Africa as one single entity and refer to us collectively as Africa. Is it any wonder that they do that? Look at the synergy that existed between us during Africa's era of liberation. One nation after another in quick succession declared freedom from colonial rule. Then again, when coup d'etats became fashionable, that tendency spread like a contagion through nearly every nation. We are each other's keepers. And this is why we need an institution that serves all but is beholden to none, the African Court of Human and People's Rights. Let us now consider the institution that safeguards our values and rights. Over the past 2 decades of its operation, The African Court of Human and People's Rights has proven time and again that it has the fortitude and courage to recalibrate our moral compass. We need that kind of oversight so that we remain observant and respectful of the rights and duties enumerated in the articles of the Banjul Charter, to which all the continent's nations are signatories. That charter complements this court's mission. And so now we must empower the court to be the institution that stands guard over those ideals, protecting and preserving our greatest inheritance. And I'm proud that Ghana has contributed its share of legal minds to this august court over the years. Justice Sophia Akufo served from 2006 to 2014 and rose to the position of President of the Court. She later served as Chief Justice of Ghana from 2017 until her retirement in 2019. Justice Dennis Ajay, a countryman and a respected member of Ghana's Supreme Court, is currently serving a 6-year term following his 2022 election. Africa has been blessed with many of the world's natural resources, including gold, silver, diamond, copper, cobalt, uranium, oil, lithium, and more. At times, it becomes easy to overlook that our most significant inheritance is our people and their cultural heritage. Those who have benefited from our continent for centuries have always understood this powerful truth. And that is why Patrice Lumumba, Eduardo Mondlane, Thomas Sankara, and Amilcar Cabral were assassinated. And that is why the Asantehene Nana Prempeh I and over 150 members of his clan, and later Nana Yaa Asantewaa, were all banished from the Gold Coast to the Seychelles. Similarly, Omukama Kabalega of Bunyoro in Uganda was also banished to Seychelles. This is why Sam Nujoma was forced into exile from Namibia, and Nelson Mandela was imprisoned on Robben Island, which was a former leper colony off the coast of Cape Town in South Africa. And this is why Steve Biko was murdered in prison. We felt the absence of these individuals and recognized the potential that we lost as a result. What I refer to in my book as the lost decades of Africa was that period from the mid to late 70s until the early 1990s, when the brain drain occurred and the continent stagnated. The median per capita growth of developing African countries at the time was 0.0%. We felt the loss of those who left to seek better opportunities for themselves and their families. These were ordinary people from all walks of life, like architects, doctors, engineers, artists, business people, bankers, and workers in the transportation and hospitality industries. Excellencies, honorable judges, imagine if Africa measured its wealth not by our natural resources, but by our people, valued individuals, free from oppression, conflict, persecution, and violence, and assured of the rights to a life of dignity, liberty, and self-determination. What would that look like? How much differently would we see ourselves? What would that wealth mean for the strength and continued sovereignty of our nations? These are not just questions for a game of what if. They are based on the reality of Africa's near future. These are questions we must ask ourselves as leaders and citizens to determine the nations we are building and the world we wish to create for our children. By 2050, Africa's population will reach 2.5 billion, and more than a quarter of the world's population will be African. By the end of this century, nearly 40% of the world's population will be African. Already the median age of the African continent is 19, compared with nearly 45 in the European Union and 39 in the United States. Can we imagine the power we hold in our hands? Technological advances have made the world feel like a small place. At no other time in our lifetime was that more evident than during the COVID-19 pandemic. By the time the World Health Organization announced the discovery of a new virus in Wuhan, China, that virus was already on an aeroplane to Johannesburg. It was already present in Accra on the roadside as individuals waited for a trotro at the Kwame Nkrumah Circle, or seated towards the rear of a daladala en route to Ngaramtoni. If you look beyond Africa, what you find is that that facade of the so-called Global North, a group of countries that have long held themselves up as beacons of democracy and human rights, of liberty, justice, and the rule of law, is fast crumbling. Judiciaries are no longer independent. Citizens and lawful residents are being disappeared by mass law enforcement and then placed without due process indefinitely in detention centers. We see executive overreach and a steady weakening of legislative independence. We see violations of international law. Restrictions are being placed on freedom of speech, assembly, and protest. There's a general loss of liberties and a sharp decline in public trust in governments. Mwalimu Julius K. Nyerere famously said, "One does not judge one's state of health by comparing yourself to a sick person." For far too long, we compared ourselves to the West and used what we believe were their standards as our benchmarks for all our endeavors. The reality we see today should serve as a clear call to action. What should be our paradigm in understanding and interacting with the rest of the world, even as we preserve our dignity and cultural identity as Africans? Honorable judges, ladies and gentlemen, I call upon African Union member states who have not yet ratified the protocol to please do so without delay. To my colleagues, heads of states in these countries, I assure you that you have nothing to fear from this court. I humbly ask all African nations and individuals to respect and implement the court's judgments in good faith, and to also make the declaration to allow individuals and non-governmental organizations direct access to this court. My father's political tribulations did not end with his detention after he wrote his unsolicited letter advising the head of state. He had to live in exile again for 13 years after another coup d'etat. But many others suffered even greater injustice and abuse of their rights and dignity. Many individuals have endured significant hardship throughout their lives. The Lumumbas, the Modlanis, the Sankaras, the Cabrals, the Prempes, the Yasantues, the Kabalegas, the Nyomas, Mandelas, and Bikos are all recognized as martyrs of the African Revolution. Had the African Court of Human and People's Rights existed earlier in our past, these grave instances of human rights abuses and injustice would have been a very important case for you to adjudicate. We would have secured justice against racist apartheid criminals, colonialists, and even our own oppressive African dictators who tortured and sent many of their countrymen to death, and countrymen and women to death. As I said earlier, all the nations on the African continent are each other's keeper, and I truly believe this. I also believe that each of us is a keeper of the dreams and hopes of our ancestors, hopes and dreams that they could not achieve. We've paved the way for their dreams to be realized, if not by us, then by generations succeeding us. Justice systems in Africa have strengthened over the past decade. In Ghana, we're strengthening our own judicial systems. As I stand and recollect my youth and my fear for my father through my recurring nightmares, I realize that I can put those fears to rest. For the past 20 years, we've had a court, that can protect the rights and dignity of African people beyond the borders of our individual nations. So allow me to say, while I'm here in this historic city of Arusha, a city well known as a site where human rights are affirmed and the dignity of African people is protected, that the time for Africa is now. Now is the time for us to meet the challenge of keeping the promise we have made to future generations, promises we have signed and pledged to uphold. Now is the time to deepen our commitments to the courts so that in 20 years from now, when we celebrate its 40th anniversary, it will stand as the leading international judicial body and a model for others. My lords, ladies and gentlemen, now is the time for Africa to step into its greatness. Excellencies, honorable judges, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of all the good citizens of Africa, I wish you a happy 20th anniversary celebration, and I thank you for your kind attention.
Your Excellency, your work reminded that justice is not a static idea, but a living commitment, one that must be renewed with every generation. Effective leadership, the vision, and the enduring commitment to champion human rights right across our continent. In recognition of the Excellency's presence on this historic occasion, the court will now present you with gifts. I now respectfully invite Honorable Justice Blaise Chikaya, President of the African Court.
And that was President John Dramani Mahama addressing a gathering at the opening of the 2026 judicial year of the African Court on Human and People's Rights. And a few things that he mentioned, he cited his own personal experience with his father's incarceration as a key driver to why he's very passionate about social justice. Also stressed the importance for countries in Africa to be each other's keepers, and also ended with that very profound statement that it's time for Africa to step into its greatness. He also celebrated some Pan-Africanists like Thomas Sankara and other leaders across the African continent, and also urged member states, Africa, to accept rulings and judgments from the African courts. And that's it from us here on News Desk, ending our bulletin from Tanzania with the President speaking. For more news, please do log on to myjaonline.com. My name is Denise Apomaije. Good morning.